like The Walking Dead or Game of Thrones, and those usually keep up a pretty good amount of my time. But
That's the main reason why I don't watch them, because I don't have time.
I can understand that. They're both excellent shows, but I mean, yeah.
Yeah. Well, hi everybody watching. We are here once again for my monthly hangout with some of my Patreon patrons, lovely, wonderful people who have chosen to give me money for some reason.
All the hours of entertainment, maybe?
Yeah, all the hours of entertainment that I have so selflessly provided. Now I want mine.
You promised to put on a garter.
Are we supposed to dance for you or something?
Yeah, yes. It's kind of backwards, isn't it? I should be dancing for you.
Just put the garter on.
Yeah.
Somebody
exactly. Cue Tina Turner's Private Dancer.
Oh, God. You don't want to see that.
Private Dancer.
I'm gonna lose patrons if I do that. People are gonna. Well, wait a minute. I didn't know this was what this was. Well, we were just talking right before we got on the air, and actually Joseph was talking a little bit about TV, and we were talking about classic TV like Rod Serling's Twilight Zone, and that's actually a favorite topic of mine. Because I think I've mentioned this in videos before, and I talked about it a little tiny bit in the video I did last month with Christy Winters about 12 Angry Men, that some of my favorite writers and some other writers that have been real inspirations to me are those early golden age of television American TV writers like Rod Serling or Patty Chayefsky or Reginald Rose. Just great writers. And you know, like Lauren said before we went on the air, Rod Serling is known as the Twilight Zone guy, but he also wrote 7 Days in May. He wrote Requiem for a Heavyweight. He wrote the original Planet of the Apes. I mean, the guy was just a genius, you know.
And it was Serling and Richard Matheson, whom I love dearly, and Charles Beaumont. Yeah. Although Charles was really kind of fading towards the end, as I understand it. But it was those three, plus I think George Clayton was in there a bit. And those guys wrote a lot of the scripts for Twilight Zone. And the other thing that I sort of making a cross connection on that is, anybody remember a Tuesday movie of the week that had this little piece by Matheson called Duel?
Yes.
This guy in a car and some nutcase in a tractor trailer. And that was picked up by a young, promising director whose name was Steven Spielberg back in 1970 some odd. So, I mean, talk about, connections and, what gave rise to what.
Yeah. Well, and not only Spielberg, if you look at the director credits for a lot of episodes of Twilight Zone or Alfred Hitchcock Presents, or if you have a chance to go back and watch those early anthology shows like Studio One or Playhouse 90, which are on DVD, by the way, not every episode, but they're collections with a bunch of episodes of Playhouse 90 and Studio One, which I would highly recommend if you're interested in classic TV. John Frankenheimer got to start on TV, Sidney Lumet started on TV, Richard Donner started on TV. I mean, you can watch Twilight Zone episodes directed by Richard Donner, which is pretty cool.
I'm going to have to look for that then. That is wild.
A lot of the great American directors that came to prominence in film in the 60s and 70s started on TV in the early 60s and the 50s. Yeah.
And speaking of old TV, I guess I don't know if this would count as old, but Seth MacFarlane recently had an interview with the guy who. At one time, he had like 7 different shows on the air at the same time, including All in the Family.
Norman Lear.
Yeah, Norman Lear. Yeah, I really need to see that interview, but those are all other shows that I need to go back and watch. I've never seen All in the Family. I've never seen any of the other 6 that he made.
Yeah, All in the Family is maybe my favorite show ever. I think it's just an amazing show because it's funny and it's ballsier than any show probably on network TV since.
Is that the one with Archie Bunker?
Archie Bunker.
It is, yeah.
And I love, because Archie is an asshole, but he's human. He's
a human asshole.
Yeah, they don't just make him into a caricature. They don't really soften him. They don't do it in a way where you start to agree with him. I mean, you clearly are sort of told that what Archie thinks and what Archie says is wrong, but at the same time he's humanized enough that you can care about him, you know. So you say he says all these terrible things about women or about black people or about politics, whatever, and you think, God, what an asshole. But then you also see like this hidden sadness in him that makes you kind of want to reach out and hug him.
I like it when shows do that. I like it when they write characters that way who aren't just like 100% black and white, evil or good, because humans just aren't like that. You know, we're rainbow-colored individuals. We have different, you know, predispositions, and so I like when people are able to realistically make characters that way.
And that's how we all begin, as a ball of cells with an asshole.
I was gonna say that Joseph just gave us a beautiful segue with the rainbow reference to talk about marriage equality, but then Chris had to throw in the cells with an asshole thing, and that kind of
it's true.
ruined it.
I almost beat you with that reference, Steve.
We can still talk about marriage equality if you want.
Yeah, I would love to, because Lauren also mentioned before we went on the air, you were talking about what an amazing news week this week has been.
Yeah, and I literally just opened a Word document about 15 minutes ago where I was expressing, you know, that I am at once incredibly happy and enormously pissed off. And I mean, it doesn't take a whole lot of imagination to recognize what I'm happy about and who I'm pissed off at. I was watching ABC this morning, and listening to Ken Blackwell, who was a guy who ran for governor in Ohio not that long ago, and I've forgotten what he's doing now. But he's complaining about, we should have let the democratic process run its course, blah, blah, blah. And, you know, these guys who talk about this crap I swear, none of them have ever considered the concept of the tyranny of the majority, that we're talking about rights here, and that rights... Ideally, I mean, they've been subject to public votes, and at one point there was a string of 31 votes that went down as it came to gay marriage and gay rights, and then all of a sudden, man, Massachusetts hit it, and then I think it was Vermont, and then Iowa, and anybody, the dominoes just started to fall, and I think it's enormous. I'm frankly amazed. I am frankly amazed.
Yeah.
And I don't know if like's the right word, but I think it's really annoying how some people on the religious right are talking about it as though the Supreme Court just invented a new law instead of reinterpreting one. Because the 14th Amendment clearly says equal protection for all people. Therefore, any law that gives everyone else a right but you is unconstitutional. So, I mean...
That's the thing, is that it's not... It's just sort of been a slow realization for a lot of people, especially in the courts, that these laws discriminating against LGBT people are just inconsistent with our constitutional principles. I mean, since the Civil War, we've really made an effort to say, okay, all men created equal means everybody. Even people who aren't men. It means all people. It means all people are created equal, and they should all be treated the same way under the law. And we it's like we're finding all these little pockets of people we forgot about. oh God, yes, you're right. I'm sorry. Come on in. Come on in. It means you too. It means you too. And some of us aren't happy about that, but the hell with those people.
Right. But just what bothers me is how long it's taken. I feel like this should have happened. I mean, I'm glad it happened. I'm glad it finally happened. I'm very happy. I even changed my profile picture to the rainbow colors. That's how on board I am. But this should have happened in the 70s.
Yeah.
This.
I agree.
It's ridiculous how long it's taken. It's a shame.
One of my favorite responses to it has been some of my friends in Canada have been responding to they're the angry sort of petulant conservatives down here who are sort of throwing up their hands and going, "That's it, I'm leaving, I'm going to Canada." and some of my Canadian friends, I've noticed they're posting things like, "We've had same-sex marriage up here since 2006, and now we just call it marriage. We don't even call it same-sex marriage anymore because it's that normalized. So please move on up here. I don't think you're going to like it any better."
I've never understood the conservatives.
It's legal here.
Right. Oh yeah, and Canada also has gun control. very, very effective.
Yeah. You don't want to move to Canada, guys.
It seems like if you want to move to a country, it's Somalia, not Canada.
Oh,
yeah, there you go.
Hey, you want a libertarian government? Hey, libertarian, paradise, Somalia.
Yeah, exactly. I had the idea. Go ahead.
One point I wanted to make, regarding just the whole concept of rights is something I've probably said half a dozen times, and I think it really does hold. Rights are either applicable to everyone, or what do they really mean? Rights. I mean, certainly as it comes to individual rights, the rights for people to interact without harm to another. If that isn't universal, then something's wrong with me.
Yeah, I mean, if you're going to deny a right to somebody, or specifically to a whole group of people, you had better have a really, really damn good argument as to why it's fair to them and why it would provide a benefit to the larger society. And I think that's the problem, is when people have tried to make this argument that same-sex couples should be denied this privilege of being able to have a state-recognized marriage, there's just no reason for it. All of the reasons for it just kind of break down under not even that close examination. It just seems like you just don't like these people. There's not a real reason why we should deny this. It's not even
the matter of they don't like them. It's that Blackwell on This Week was astonishing. He was getting all upset about the idea that people are now going to consider some Christians as bigots. News bulletin. They are.
Yes.
They want to hold on to their belief. They want to hold on to, Leviticus 18:22 when they've got nothing to say about Red Lobster. They've got nothing to say about,
exactly.
Your wool coat with the silk lining, or any of going to the barbecue and having barbecue pork. Oh goodness,
Yeah. Now one of
no alcohol in church under any circumstances.
One of the responses I read in an article yesterday, most of the response I was surprised on my Facebook feed was overwhelmingly supportive. There were only a few that were negative Nancy's about it. But one of the articles one of my old Christian high school teachers shared, one of the points they made was maybe the discussion will be a little bit can be a little bit more civil now that we've actually got what we want. And I think that's probably a bit true, because it's a lot harder to have a civil discussion when one group holds power over another group, and that's not the case. Now that there's nothing actually at stake, I think it will be a lot easier to have a more civil conversation about everything.
Well, except now they have other areas that they can fight more ardently against, like I can't remember. I have lost track, but in Idaho there's a movement. It was called Add the Words. I forget exactly what it means, but against discrimination against LGBT people in workplaces and such. The language is not in the legislation to prohibit discrimination.
And that's really the next step, is making sure that you can't be fired because you're gay, lesbian, transgendered, or bisexual. And that's going to be an argument.
Did you guys see a post? I saw it on Right Wing Watch, their YouTube channel, but it was from Glenn Beck's radio show, and he was afraid that now that gay marriage is legalized, he was afraid that the federal government might take his radio program off the air for his pro marriage opinion, and it's just these guys are just going nuts. They think the government's just going to throw out the whole First Amendment.
Well, free speech is still the law of the land.
Yeah.
But the problem is, so are the consequences of free speech. If you want to be an asshole, you can pay the price for being an asshole.
Exactly.
Hello, kitty cat.
Exactly. Well, it's the idea of how persecuted they feel. I think that's sort of telling as to where their mindset is. If nobody's taking anything away from them,
exactly,
they're just extending a right to other people who haven't had it before. So nobody's losing anything, but they feel like they're losing something.
They feel like their right to religious freedom has been infringed upon when it hasn't at all. You don't get. It's just like you said in that. I can't remember which video it was, but he said you don't get to enforce the rules of your club upon those who do not wish to be part of your club. It doesn't work that way.
You waiving your beliefs about, your right to waive your beliefs about ends at my nose. Thank you.
The only right you have regarding gay marriage is, if you are opposed to it because of your religion, is to dislike it and choose not to associate yourself with it. And that's it.
Yeah, exactly. I've said that to I have relatives who are conservative Christian, and we get along great most of the time, and because we don't usually talk about these sorts of things. But on one of the few occasions where we have had this conversation, that's almost exactly what I said. I said, look, if you don't like it, you still have every right not to like it. No one's taking the right to not like it away from you. You can still be as bigoted and hateful toward gay people as you want. I think that's sad, but you have the right to do it. It's just that there are more and more people who are just sick of going along with it.
Yeah, and I even saw one. I read on the day that it happened that they legalized it. I had the time of my life trolling the comments sections and looking at the conservatives getting all butthurt and whatnot. And this one person, they quoted Padme Amidala's line from Star Wars 3, and this is how liberty dies, with thunder and straws. And I said, if you understood the definition of the word liberty, you would know that line doesn't work. Yeah. Liberty is granting more rights to more people.
I had some Texas friends who brought that quote up because of the Affordable Care Act, for crying out loud.
Oh my God. Yeah, we should mention that too, because it's like, I don't know if our Supreme Court got swapped with the Bizarro World Supreme Court or what, but their decisions this last week have been pretty good, and it's sort of a strange feeling to say that, to be like, whoa, like they made decisions that didn't make the country worse. Like, that's really cool.
It's like real pride in our country for the first time in damn long.
Yeah. They handed down a series of sensible and humane decisions.
Wow.
So
that
weird.
Empower people, that are more inclusive.
Yeah.
That allow people to act more freely.
Let them die.
Yeah, bada bang, isn't that lovely? There's this old line from, that classical old novel, Jonathan Livingston Seagull, the only true law is that which leads to freedom. I mean, it's a cliched line, but it's true.
Now that we're on the subject of the Supreme Court, I mean, the first decision, of course, was the Affordable Health Care decision that upheld the ACA against this challenge, and it was such a ridiculous challenge in the first place that even Justice Roberts, who is traditionally more of a conservative, sided with the majority, and that's why it was a 6-3 decision instead of a 5-4 decision. And I read Scalia's dissent, which, I mean, and his dissents are often kind of, insane. Yeah, good word. And but this one especially struck me as just decision upheld the ACA against this challenge, and it was such a ridiculous challenge in the first place that even Justice Roberts, who is I can hear myself, sided with the majority, and that's why it was a 6-3 decision. There we go. Sorry about that, Tiger B. I was getting some feedback. The decision by Scalia was ridiculous because he seemed to be deciding it with the idea that the law was written to not work, which is a little weird if you think about it. Like the way it was Roberts's decision, his majority decision was based on the opposite. He said, okay, there might be some parts of the law that maybe the wording is a little ambiguous, but in those cases we should interpret it in such a way as would allow the law to operate, because clearly we shouldn't assume that Congress wrote and passed a law that they intended to not work. And Scalia said, nope, they clearly intended for this law not to work, which is just weird for a judge to say something like that. Like,
I swear, Scalia doesn't want anything to change. He just wants to lock the whole thing in stone as though nothing changed since 1789.
Yeah.
Explain this to me, please.
Yeah, and then my favorite part was in he said, people of the future will look at the decisions that this court has made, and they will remember these, he calls it like the acrobatics that the court had to go through to uphold this law. So people will remember this. And I thought, man, you are living in dream world if you think that in 50 years or 100 years people are going to look back at these decisions and agree with you. Like, welcome
to the ego of Antonin Scalia.
I mean, yeah, it's like you're on the wrong side. Like, just historically, take whether you agree with things philosophically or morally or whatever. Just look at it in terms of the historical trend. You're on the wrong side, Tony. Scalia. You're on the wrong
20 years
side.
from now, somebody looking back, going, you know what I hate? What I really hate about my life? Having health care. What the fuck happened?
Yeah. Exactly.
Well, you have health care, so everybody else now gets to have health care, and you no longer, you get to wear the, you get to wear the uniform, you get to wear the medals, and you sit on the handlebar where everybody pedals. To borrow from Alan Sherman, an oldie from Peter and the Commissar.
People are going to look back and wonder how he got on the court in the first place.
It's getting to that point. It's getting to that point. In the last 6 or 7 years, especially, he's been so wacko that people are starting to look at it like, what is this guy even doing here?
If you get a chance to read the Friday dissent from him and the other three, everything's just opinion. There's no legal binding to his dissents.
Man.
Well, the dissents don't have legal binding. They're just supposed to.
There's no argument for why the gay marriage is bad. It's just because I don't like it.
Yeah.
I don't want it. No.
Exactly.
I know the driving force behind this is fear of change. That's all I gotta know. That's why these people are talking the way they are. They're bigoted, and they fear change. That's why.
Yeah. Which is one of the silliest fears to have.
Put it best when he said you got nothing.
Yeah, exactly.
Sorry.
And fear of change is one of the silliest fears to have because it's inevitable. I mean, even if you don't like the sort of big picture changes that are happening, I could understand the impulse maybe to try and resist them, but it's a losing battle. I mean, change is inevitable. You can't you can't just say, okay, I like things the way they are. Let's just keep them this way.
I mean, think about it this way. There has never been a generation of parents that didn't say, ugh, kids these days. Things just change.
Yeah.
And we don't know, we don't have to like the changes. Things just change, though,
Yep, starting with God and Adam and Eve, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, exactly.
I think the only legitimate concern that the conservatives have, and you guys might disagree with me on this, but as with the cases like where they have the bakery that doesn't want to make the cake and stuff, I think they have some legitimate concerns there, because for a business like that makes a customized product, I think there are legitimate arguments for why they should have the freedom to choose not to make something that violates their beliefs. I don't think this extends in a broader sense to more industries like restaurants or something. I don't think a restaurant could refuse a gay couple celebrating their anniversary or something like that. Because I've talked to a few of my Christian friends about this, and I think they blow it out of proportion a lot, like Glenn Beck's nonsense. But in that instance, I think I hope that the trend kind of goes back the other way, and that some of these businesses like that don't get penalized as severely as they have been, or that they're more freely allowed to operate the businesses the way they want to. And that's coming from I'm gay myself, and fortunately I'm happy now I can get married in my home state if I want to.
Congratulations!
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 But if I went to a business or something and to provide service for my wedding, if they said they didn't want to, personally I wouldn't make a big deal of it. I wouldn't sue them or anything. I'd just find someone that wants to do business with me, because I don't want to have to try to deal with someone that doesn't want to go into a contract with me. So that sounds like a lot of hassle to me.
That's the most practical way to deal with places like that, is to just, all us gay folks who would otherwise buy a cake from you will just go somewhere else.
Yeah, in the long term, all you're talking about is outfits that are going to lose business because they can't be bothered to, live in the 21st century.
Yeah. I will say, I mean, I'm sympathetic to the idea that, of course, people who run businesses should have some ability to choose what they, it shouldn't be as though a customer can just come in and demand anything they want and the business owner has to do it. But I think the difference is, are you discriminating on the basis of the person walking in the door, or are you discriminating on the basis of what the person is asking you to do?
I think that's a good distinction.
Because,
right,
yeah, go ahead.
I heard an example. A friend of mine said that there's a difference between, are they asking you to make hate speech, or are they just asking you to make a cake?
Yeah, exactly.
Like if the KKK walks in and asks you to make a horrible cake or something like that, like with racist hate speech, that there's a difference between saying no to that and just saying no to a gay couple walking in to your store and asking for a cake.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly where I was going with that. If someone comes in and wants you to make a particular product that is inconsistent with your values, and it's the sort of thing that you wouldn't make for anybody,
right,
then it's perfectly fine, to my way of thinking, to say, no, I'm not going to do that. But if a gay couple comes in and they're asking for something that you would be perfectly happy to make for a straight couple, and you tell them no, but you tell the straight couple yes, so then to me that's a problem.
Mm-hmm.
That's where it runs into the unlawful discrimination.
Which is a point you made a couple of videos ago, didn't you?
Yeah, yeah, and I know a point lots of people have made. It's that, and I think that's the key is. Nobody's saying that, well, the KKK should be allowed to go in and demand, the most racist, vile cake possible, and if you say no, then you're discriminating against them. That's not the way it works. You wouldn't make that cake for anybody, So it's not...
I think I have a similar opinion to you, but I think I would go as far as to say that they should be allowed to refuse to make a wedding cake for a gay ceremony because it's the product itself. Because most of these businesses had still said, we'll make anything else for you, just not that. And honestly, I think that even allowing that, I think would be all right. It's just because it's the product itself, even though it is somewhat discriminatory for against a certain demographic.
Yeah,
I think that in something. At least in an industry like that, like someone's going to make a cake for you. It's not like if this store doesn't sell it to you, no one's going to sell it to you. Like I think in this situation, I think it would be acceptable to allow that degree of freedom of choice to the business owner.
Mm-hmm. There's probably a store somewhere down the south that would sell cakes to the KKK too. So
without a doubt,
depending on what.
Absolutely.
Especially
rebel flag cakes.
Yeah, I was going to say, especially in the last week or so, when that's another group throwing a little tantrum.
Yeah, I liked one of the things that came up in my news feed was one of those e-card things that said it looked like my Facebook feed. There was a battle between the Confederates and a Skittles factory.
Exactly. Man, actually, it was weird. I know for me personally, yesterday was a real tennis match of a day in terms of my mood because Friday actually, not yesterday, but because Friday was the same-sex marriage ruling of the Supreme Court, and that happened in the morning, and that got me in a great mood. I was like, this is amazing. It's a historic day. Oh, this is great. And then I noticed that the tavern down the street from me had just started flying a Confederate flag.
Oh, bloody hell.
And that pulled me down. And I tried to think oh, this is just a local thing. Don't get upset about this. What about the national story? What about, come on, gay marriage is legal all throughout. It's the law of the land. This is great. But I kept seeing this Confederate flag out of the corner of my eye and thinking, and then, the guy posted on Facebook about it and said, I've decided to display the Confederate flag because, and please don't mistake it for a symbol of racism.
It for what?
There's only
he did
one thing that can symbolize.
Yeah, and he basically, his excuse was, well, just don't say that it symbolizes that. You know, say that it's about freedom of speech, blah blah blah, and you know, I usually don't participate in those things, but it's right down the street, and I was really pissed off about it. So I left him this really, you know, pissy comment on his feed, basically saying, you know, oh, how nice to see a fellow white person being bold enough to display a symbol of white supremacy. That's great to see, you know, especially in a Civil War town. Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I saw a meme that had it was a half and half meme. It had the Confederate flag on top and the words that said, "This flag is offensive because of 4 years of slavery," and then it showed the regular American flag on the bottom, and it listed like the Trail of Tears, the and all those other things, and saying be logically consistent, ban this flag too, except the argument is kind of specious because the Confederate flag was founded on the idea of avoiding abolition, I believe, and the regular American flag, it symbolizes all sorts of hypocrisies, but we're working through them.
And it's open to correction.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I would not fight anybody who tried to say that American history is a really bloody, regrettable thing, and then that there's lots of things that this country has done that we should not have done, and that we still haven't really reckoned with. You know, the treatment of Native Americans is a big one, and obviously the treatment of Black Americans and slavery and the aftermath. I mean, these are things that are still problems that we've never even quite admitted to.
Yeah,
you know?
We killed more Native Americans than Hitler killed Jews.
Yeah, exactly, and it's a really ugly, hideous, unavoidable part of our history. I mean, I was thinking just the other day, because I did a 5 Stupid Things video that's going to go up in a couple of weeks that mentions this, like the internment of Japanese Americans during World War II, which has gotten a lot more attention relatively recently, but still isn't something that we're just raring to talk about. You know, there's all kinds of stuff that we've done.
Yeah, what happened to the Italian Americans and the German Americans? And actually, there were some German Americans that got attention, but Italian Americans?
That's true, yeah. People who were ethnically descended from our enemies in that war were treated as though they were enemies of the state, and it was inexcusable. And it was only 70 years ago. I mean, we can't even say like, oh, that was 200 years ago. That's a whole different time. Not really. Yeah, so I'm completely on board with people who say, let's not forget about all the terrible things that have been done under the American flag. But yeah, the difference is the Confederate flag, I mean, the fact that it only stood for 4 years of a country that no longer exists anymore actually makes it worse, because it only ever stood for that thing. The Confederacy didn't say, hey, you know what, we changed our minds. We're not on board with the whole slavery thing. We're going to free the slaves. That never happened.
Right, and the American flag is, in addition to those other regrettable things, we have our ideals, we have the other amazing things that we've done. We just legalized gay marriage. That's not another good thing. So it's not all bad things behind the American flag, but it's only bad things behind the Confederate flag. Yeah. That's the difference.
Yeah, and even the good things that people try to attribute to it all sort of reduce back to slavery and white supremacy. You know, like I've heard people say like, well, you know, the North wasn't any better. There were racists in the North, which is completely true. And well, Lincoln wasn't fighting to end slavery at the beginning of the war. He was fighting to restore the Union, which again is true. But Lincoln only had to fight to restore the Union in the first place because the Union was splintered by slave-holding states that didn't want to give up their slaves.
Right.
So no matter how you look at it, you can't help but come back to that issue.
Yeah. It's amazed me how often, you know, people want to, you know, talk about states' rights and all this other stuff as regards to the core, you know, causes of the Civil War. I can still remember, I mean, I think this was a discussion in, you know, back in my high school U.S. history class. Yeah. And ultimately, you know, and this is like 45, almost not quite 50 years ago. And the result is still the same. The primary cause of the Civil War was the South's insistence on owning people as property.
Yeah. states' rights was the original dog whistle political term.
Bada bing.
Before anybody called it dog whistle politics, states' rights was the original one of those. Because and people still use it. They still talk about states' right now. Of course, when there's also like, well, the inner city, urban. Like these are sort of code words that white people use to talk about black people without actually having to admit that they're talking about them. But it's the same. States' rights was the original dog whistle term because you said states' rights, and you didn't say slavery, racism, but that's what you meant, and that's what everybody knew you meant.
Right. It seems like states' rights is this word that became used. It sounds good in theory, but every time it has been applied for the removal of rights from a different specific group of people, no matter who's used, even when it started getting used when Obama got elected, even when it started getting used when the ACA was passed, all those things, it's always been about taking away rights from a specific group of people.
Yeah, that's a great point. Exactly.
And I think very shortly you're going to see the same thing going on as it comes to this whole voter registration business, because it's the same deal. People trying to regulate and remove rights, and in this case, probably the most important one of all, voting.
Yeah.
Are there any other countries besides the U.S. that have the kind of, I'll say, power at the equivalent of the state level? Like, are there any other countries whose governments are so like divided between this like state and national level?
I don't know. I mean, I know there are governments that have federal systems like ours, but I don't know if there are any others. At least none that I can think of, and I'm not 100% educated on it. But
I think a lot of it is the fact that, number one, we're as big as we are, and number two, there are as many states. I mean, you can sort of compare it to Canada, except Canada, you've only got the 5 or 6 provinces, and but you're talking about just more area and more people than you can when you talk about, say, France or Germany or something like that, where there are states or provinces or prefectures or whatever have you. But again, the volume of people and the whole concept of states' rights never really even came up there. Not to my knowledge.
And I'm pretty sure you mentioned Canada. I'm pretty sure Canada with their provinces, it is not to the same extent as we have here, but like similar sort of, like as to the extent that there are kind of minute differences between the different provinces, but there's still one centralized government. Like if you look at ratings or whatever, like for content ratings for TV shows or movies, in each different province in Canada, it's like different. Instead of like a movie that's PG-13 here in Missouri is going to be PG-13 over in Washington D.C. But so I mean,
that's really interesting. I didn't know that.
Yeah. Now the other thing too, as it comes to Canada, is Quebec and the on and off business about secession. Because of the whole French Canadian versus the rest of Canada. Yeah. But that's been quiet for quite a while. I mean, that was very big. I remember back in the 70s, and then I think again in the 90s. But otherwise, it's sort of gone back into the woods for now.
Yeah. Well, they had a vote, I think, in the 90s, and it
failed.
It failed. So I guess they kind of said, okay, we gave it a shot.
Sort of like Britain from the EU.
Yeah, yeah. Or Scotland from the UK.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, yeah.
Yeah.
It's
I don't
nice
think
that
we've heard the last of the Scotland and the UK thing, though.
No, a lot of. I mean, it's just completely informal. It means nothing. But all of my Scottish friends were unhappy with that result. Like, I don't think I have a single friend that I know, like through the internet, that were pleased with the result of that vote. So
oh wait, no, the secession from
the secession thing. Yeah. Well, most of my friends are liberals anyway. So I mean, people weren't crazy about the general election result either.
Yeah. You listen to NPR in your car?
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh man, NPR. I wouldn't. Actually, when I heard right when I came in before we went on the air, I heard Matthew, you and Joseph were talking about something, and I heard you were sort of discussing like the Baltimore thing, and I thought about how indispensable my NPR station is, because the NPR station I listen to is the Baltimore station, and their local programming has been great as far as, ever since April when the Baltimore uprising sort of happened. That's been like my go-to source of information about that stuff, because they have continued to talk about the sort of broader issues that touched on, and that NPR station in Baltimore, WYPR, is just outstanding.
The few times that I've ever listened to NPR, like, I mean, I just haven't really been like, I don't have a problem with the content. It's just the way they talk. It's like, hi, welcome to NPR. This is All Things Considered. We're just gonna buzz in your ear. Family Guy did joke about it, but it's the same deal.
That's true. That's true. That's true. One of my favorite things about my friend Jason Harding not only does Opinionville on YouTube, he also has podcasts that he does, and one of the podcasts that he does is called American Monsters and How to Destroy Them, and he plays a character on it, and the character is sort of like an Ira Glass type of voice, so he kind of talks like this, and and he's well, hi everybody, welcome to the show. It's like it's sort of like you can tell he's making fun of this American life, and but yeah, that's true. I love NPR, but that's totally true. It's very laid back. It's very sort of and now the news.
I think that's over all the yelling.
Isn't it to make the focus be on the news?
Ira Glass and Ira Flato will battle to the death in a steel cage.
The Battle of the Iras. Yeah, I'm sorry, Lauren. What were you going to say?
Well, the whole point is, in the case of NPR, for the focus to be on the news and not on the personalities.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's
what I like about it.
To faw noise.
Exactly. Why aren't they yelling?
Oh, speaking of
calling each other names. Yeah.
Speaking of news personalities, I actually I regret doing it, of course, but a couple of days ago I watched some clips of Ann Coulter just talking, just like saying things. And you don't even have to find a specific video. You just have to type in Ann Coulter, and you're bound to find something that's gonna like send you through a roller coaster of pissed off and super pissed off. And she's at this libertarian meeting, and she's saying all these. She called the audience pussies.
Yeah, she's a troll.
I cannot watch her because I'm too afraid of breaking my screen. So
exactly.
I'm amazed that Bill Maher actually puts up with her. I mean, she's promoting her new book and all this other happy Hassenpfeffer, but why give her? Why do it? I mean, yes, she's not just a troll. She really says nothing of value. I mean, it's not even an intelligent opposing opinion. It's just her trying to be on her soapbox, being foolish and stupid and utterly absurd, and I don't get that.
Didn't she say something recently about women should not vote? They should have the right to vote, but they shouldn't actually vote, or something along that line.
Good night.
Yeah. And
was that her?
Yeah. And she said what? And I forget what she said. She said something else recently that was just awful. And it's been since I mentioned her in a 5 Stupid Things video a couple weeks ago, basically saying that I'm just not going to mention her anymore. And then after that, she said something else. She was on a talk show and said something just, she's a troll. We should all just block her. We should all we should sort of decide as a society, okay, Ann, we're going to block you. If we see you on TV, we're going to watch something else. We're not going to talk about you. We're not going to react. Yeah.
I'm sorry we talked about her this long in this podcast.
Yeah, but it's when you get to the phrase Ann Coulter saying things, you just stop there and go, you know what, I'm going to do something else, because it does a disservice to that point of view. As much as I disagree with that point of view, and as much as I find like the most of sort of conservative right-wing political views to be things I just could never agree with, I mean, there are intelligent people who hold those views. And
unfortunately.
And it does a disservice to them to pay attention to the really awful people who are just trying to...
Another person in that same basket, though, is S.E. Cupp.
That's true. S.E. Cupp, yeah.
She tries to be reasonable, but ultimately, she's just... I'd almost say she's a reasonable version of Ann Coulter, except that it way oversimplifies things, for one thing. And number two, how she can actually claim to be an atheist and yet say that she envies those who have faith. No.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sympathetic to a certain point. I mean, I try to be. I don't want to be the kind of atheist that is like bitterly anti-religion, and I try to give credit where credit is due, not to the religion itself or to the beliefs, but like when a religious group does something positive, or when a religious group shows signs of progress, like when the Anglican Church decided to ordain gay bishops or woman bishops. I think those are signs of progress. I think that's something that should be celebrated, even though I'm not religious, and I generally think that religion is a bad thing. They're social institutions, and when they move forward and make steps to catch up with the rest of us, I think that's a good thing. But yeah, S.E. Cupp, it seems like she really, really wants to be a religious person, and I, as an atheist, I just don't really understand that. Like, I understand admiring certain aspects of it. I understand wanting to have communication and understanding with religious people. I think that's very important. I don't think we should be hostile to one another unless it's, a conflict that just can't be resolved. But yeah, that kind of weirds me out too. I'm like,
yeah, I remember one statement she made that I think she said like she would never vote for an atheist president or something like that. 'Cause she didn't think that an atheist, because atheists are such a minority, like she didn't think that a person without faith could adequately represent a nation that's a majority Christian. That I just thought that was it just sounds like an argument that no atheist would ever make. It really made me wonder whether what she actually.
Well, it's also a failure to recognize the at least the theoretical nature of a secular nation, a nation which is not built on a religion, which allows the practice of all religions without the dominance of any single one. I mean, she completely misses the point.
Anyone qualified to be president, would understand that they have, what the rights they have to protect of all groups. Like they shouldn't have to be from a majority group in order to fairly govern a majority group.
Yeah, it's a little bit like saying, well, I could never vote for a Pacific Islander because there aren't that many of them that live here, and I just don't think they could really understand this country if there aren't that many Pacific Islanders that are Americans. It's just that argument has nothing to do with anything. I mean,
you know what? I really don't like rock and roll.
Yeah.
Interesting comment by David there.
Yeah. Yeah, David just said in the chat that she said if Republicans don't get on board with gay marriage, they're going to become relic. Yeah, S.E. Cupp has been really strong on gay marriage. I will give her that much. And in fact, her response to the Supreme Court legalizing it was pretty good. She seems to, I mean, she's not all bad, but she's with the religious stuff, and also she has a real fondness for Ayn Rand, which I find a huge turnoff for anybody. Like
I enjoyed reading Ayn Rand.
Blazing red flag.
Those philosophies too far, or a lot of people do take her philosophies way too far in practical application.
I don't think you can take Ayn Rand too seriously if you put any kind of weight on just that one thing that John Donne wrote about. No man is an island.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Like 400 years ago, John Donne says. Yeah, 400 years ago, John Donne says, "No man is an island," and then Ayn Rand comes along and says, "Yes, they are." Okay.
Well, I mean, the whole idea is, if you're a good person, you don't be a dick. Whereas Ayn Rand says, okay, everyone who has a good job is going to be a dick to everyone else. So that's a problem.
Yeah, it's like if we're all dicks, then it'll work out. I don't know though.
Well, that sounds like a bad strategy to begin with, if you take it literally, right?
I've never read anything by Ayn Rand, thankfully. I mean, it just sounds like it'd be a waste of my time.
I just don't. Well, I mean, I just find her a poor writer, honestly. I mean, even if I didn't disagree with her, her values as much as I do, I just don't think she's a very good writer.
I enjoyed reading them, but I think I've read Atlas Shrugged, The Fountainhead, I think Anthem. But I liked them, but they all say almost exactly the same thing. It's the same story told just with different characters.
Yeah. You are an Iron Man. You could make it through all three of those books.
And of course, I used to be a lot more conservative than I am now. Yeah. That was back in my early college days.
Yeah, that's impressive.
But John Galt's famous speech is just, page after page after page of dribble.
Yeah,
I don't know. It goes on.
The speech, some of those speeches it was basically just, espousing her own philosophy, but they were way too long to be captivating.
Yeah, and I mean, I'm a big fan of Joseph Conrad, and Joseph Conrad liked to write, he would write entire novels where it was someone orally telling the story. Like Heart of Darkness, his most famous work, is almost entirely in quotation marks, because it's the narrator, it's not just a narrator's voice, the character in a story telling the other people this story. So basically the whole book is a big long speech. But yeah, even so, I mean, that Galt speech is just absurd. I mean, where did she not have an editor? Was there no one who could be like, look?
I think she wrote that speech first and then made up a story to go around it.
Exactly. If she was writing today, she would just have a blog. She would just write stuff.
Can you imagine her trying to use Twitter?
Oh my God! Yeah,
140 characters.
How am I supposed to get my thoughts down in that? That's ridiculous.
Be like part 1 of 5 tweets.
The soul of wit.
Yeah, she disagreed with John Donne about No Man is an Island, and she disagreed with Shakespeare about brevity being the soul of wit. Those are two great English writers that she was just like, nah, fuck that.
Straight to.
But you had this idea that, if the businessmen all left, that the wheels of the economy would grind to a halt, and I cannot get my head around that at all.
Yeah. Well, and I think it's not fair to blame it entirely on her, because lots of people have these ideas that aren't necessarily tying them directly to Ayn Rand, but she was part of this mentality that kind of took over and still exists to this day with a lot of more conservative right-leaning people, that we ought to structure the society around the needs of the entrepreneurs and forget about the employees.
Trickle down economics right there.
That'll work just fine. I think that'll be great.
Yeah,
it sounds like what we already have, and that's the problem.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, even in the last presidential election, with some of the things Romney was saying, it's like he's talking about, I want to be pro-business. I want people to be able to start a business if they want. Well, that's great, but most people aren't going to start a business. Most people are working for someone else, and you're kind of screwing those people.
And you made the point a long time ago, Steve, that the government is not a business and should not be run as a business, because the government is not an entity that is designed to make a profit. It's designed to serve people.
Exactly. If you're spending a lot of money, but you're spending it on things that are necessary services, then that's okay. I mean, well, one of Thomas.
I forget the economics term that describes things like streets and streetlights and that kind of thing. They won't turn a profit for any business. They need to be there, though.
No.
They need a public entity to make them.
And fire departments and water companies and general things that are run at the city or the local level. A profit? What profit? I don't see a profit, but I see a necessity. I also see
exactly. It doesn't exist to make a profit. It exists because it has to be there, And the idea that government should be a profit-making entity, I think, is just destructive. Thomas Paine said that if you want smaller government, all you have to do is create a society where the private citizens take care of the things that the government would otherwise be doing. And as society grows and becomes more of a community, then the government can pull back a little bit. But until that happens, as long as you have people that are unemployed and starving, as long as you have people that can't afford their rent or that can't afford to take care of their children, or You know, you have businesses that would otherwise have, you know, unacceptable safety standards and all of these things. As long as the government needs to be there to enforce these things and provide these services, that's what has to happen. The government has to come in and fill the gap.
Yeah.
And if you don't want a big government, that's fine. You start.
And where has there ever been a society where each and every citizen is self-sufficient? Where? I'd love to hear.
Never.
Long time.
Yeah.
I've actually, the past few weeks, I've been having these Facebook discussions with one of my Facebook friends. He's an anarchist or libertarian. I'm not sure, and he thinks that if government just goes away and we leave things to the free market.
What does he do when his house catches fire?
I don't know.
Exactly.
I don't know. Work itself out, and I just think that's insane. I don't see how a reasonable person can arrive at that conclusion.
Well, I mean, unless he's willing to farm his own food and spin his own thread for his own clothing, I don't see him being, again, back to the island. Man is not an island, so.
Yeah. Solution. He should be a mountain man.
There you go.
There you go, yes.
There you go. Hey, I would be more than happy. There are so many millions of square miles out in Montana where there's nobody. Just go. Just go, and please don't come back in.
The BLM will tell you to go back to society.
The BLM will be like, you can't be here. This isn't your land. Get out of here.
I understand you're using a musket and it's hard to shoot the deer, but you don't have a license. You need to.
You're breaking the law, dude. You have to go. Yeah, I had the idea the other day of, like, you know, we should write to President Obama and say, okay, I know that the federal government owns just millions and millions of acres of land. There must be some patch of land somewhere on the continent, somewhere in the world that the U.S. federal government controls where there's nobody else there. Let's just give it to all the people that hate this place so much. And if you don't like gay marriage and you don't like, you know, health care and all these other problems that people have with the more progressive changes in this country, just let's let them all go there.
We could do like China and build them an island.
Yeah, I'm gonna build a giant Game of Thrones style wall around it while we're at it.
It'll be the greatest public works project ever. It'll put so many people to work. It'll reduce unemployment. We'll just go out in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean somewhere.
And we let them build it. At such a place, let them build it.
That's a great idea. Here, go.
Whatever happened to the idea of the libertarian city in the ocean or something like that? Just let them construct it. So if they're not good enough to construct it, they will, you know, suffer whatever fates they suffer because they obviously didn't need the rest of us, you know, engineers and scientists to help them design the place.
And actually, the game BioShock, the society there that collapsed is entirely libertarian. So if they make an ocean city that's entirely libertarian, spooky portent, fellows.
Yeah, right. David said we could just put a fence around Mexico. I would actually put the fence a little more northern and maybe put it around Texas, and just give like a 30-day notice. Anybody who wants to leave can leave now. But once the fence is up, we're not letting anybody out. We're not letting anybody in.
No, we can't do that because we're going to give Texas to Israel, or Israel to Texas.
Oh, that's true.
We decided that a couple of sessions ago.
That's true. That's a good point. Yeah, we're going to give Texas to Israel because it's the same climate, but it's just lots more room.
Speaking of land, does it seem to anybody else like legislation and policies and all that to do with land ownership seem almost designed to get land out of the hands of poor people and sort of siphon it up to rich people? Like, you can't escape property tax except for, I guess, temporarily. I don't know exactly, but
that doesn't seem right though, because they're so against redistribution of wealth. Unless it's being distributed to them. From people who don't have that much to begin with. I don't know. Yeah, but about the libertarian paradise stuff, I mean, every attempt to start something like that has utterly failed. And I mean, I know that we've mentioned it in one of these hangouts before, and I've talked about it in videos before. Like one of the big hints that libertarianism isn't a viable system is that nobody does it.
Right. No one does it.
Nobody does it.
Well, also, is there a history of any libertarian society that was successful?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I think that's a false statement. The statement's true, but like at one point, no one had ever tried a democracy. So
yeah,
a democracy actually worked, and republics actually worked, things like that. But
yeah, and I'm sure
the question is who's
yeah,
willing to give libertarianism a try on a national level, and I don't see that coming anytime soon.
No, and it's not proof. Like it's not an ironclad logical proof that libertarianism is a bad system, but it's a good hint. It's somewhat telling to be able to look at the entire world. Not a single country is attempting a libertarian economy, a libertarian government. If it's so self-evidently superior, why isn't anybody even saying, "Hey, let's give it a shot. Let's see what happens"?
That's the thing too. You get in conversations with these people, and they're all like, "Oh, but obviously it would work. What are you, stupid? Obviously it would work." And I'm thinking, well, okay, can you please help me understand that then? Because I don't understand it at all.
What about the several studies that show that these economic theories have been tried and utterly failed in our own country? Like the trickle down. There's plenty of studies that show that no, it doesn't work that way.
No, and yet people are still. That's one of. I'll make this point and then we'll say goodbye because it's been an hour. But one of the things that makes me so frustrated with the Democratic Party in this country is how they let Republicans get away with saying stuff like that. They let Republicans get away with continuing to promote, trickle down economics, supply side economics, when statistically we know that sort of thing doesn't work, and that it actually leads to great harm to people on the lower end of the spectrum. You can point at the disparity between the rich and the poor, the income inequality that is larger now than it's been since the 1920s. And as a result of largely, supply-side Republican-influenced economic policies. And why the Democrats don't jump all over them about that, I do not know. But it's one of the most frustrating things about being a more liberal, progressive-minded person is the major party that lines up the most with your philosophy is just kind of sitting there letting the other guys run the conversation.
That shit is treated like a viable part of the argument.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Well, let's hear him out. No.
Yeah, and meanwhile, you've got Edward R. Murrow saying that there is not on every occasion two equal and valid sides to an argument.
Yeah.
Trickle down didn't work in 1980. It didn't work in 2000. It doesn't work, boys and girls.
Yeah. Yep. Well, on that note, I'm going to call this to a close. Thank you guys, all of you who are in the room with me. Thank you so much for joining me. Thank you especially for being parts of my Patreon campaign. It's an honor and incredibly flattering. And I'm grateful to you guys and all of you guys who are patrons, whether you're in the room with me or not, for supporting me and being a part of the campaign. You make my life better every day. You have no idea.
Happy to help.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. And all you guys, you're the best. And all you guys who are watching, actually we had a pretty decent sized audience for this one this time, so that was awesome. Thank you all you guys who are watching live. We appreciate it. And I'll be back to do this again next month. So thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.
Take care, Steve.
Bye.
Bye.